It's 7 p.m. Thursday, April 11th here in Seoul.
Coming up on News Center tonight. President Moon Jae-in arrives in Washington for a summit meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. They're expected to meet at around midnight Korea time.
Korea celebrates the 100th anniversary of the foundation of a government in exile during Japan's colonial rule.
Korea's constitutional court rules anti-abortion law unconstitutional. News Center begins now. Hello and welcome to Arirang News Center. Live from Seoul, I'm Han-daeun.
And I'm Noah-ram. Thank you, as always, for joining us this evening. Now, moving on to our top story. A few hours from now, President Moon Jae-in will hold a summit with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump in Washington, their first in nearly 4 months.
As the world closely watches, much attention is focused on whether the two leaders will meet halfway in resolving North Korea's nuclear impasse. Arirang's chief political correspondent Shin Se-min in Washington for us tonight.
Different time, similar circumstances. The expectation is President Moon Jae-in's latest trip to the White House will be similar to his last, when the South Korean leader took the role of mediator, providing fresh momentum for nuclear talks between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. President Moon is back in the U.S. Capitol for another crisis management session with Trump, this time seeking to find a way for North Korea and the U.S. to give and take to achieve their stated goals of making a nuclear-free Korea Peninsula a reality. During his brief stay in Washington, President Moon will also sit down separately with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, and Vice President Mike Pence, all of whom, like President Trump, are strong proponents of North Korea's FFVD, meaning the regime's final, fully, and verified denuclearization. For Presidents Moon and Trump, their summit is the fulfillment of a promise made by President Trump shortly after the second North Korea-U.S. summit collapsed in February. Trump's decision to pull the plug on that summit dealt a huge blow to President Moon, who had staked enormous political capital on it being a success. It's also a chance to reaffirm the strength of their alliance despite some mixed messages since the Hanoi summit, and perhaps time to find a middle ground between Trump's all-or-nothing strategy and Kim's small deal approach. It remains to be seen if President Trump will be tempted by Seoul's proposal of North Korea steadily abandoning its nuclear weapons while the U.S. slowly eases sanctions as part of a gradual process towards complete denuclearization. President Moon has said all along that he's on the same page as his American counterpart on the need to reach the end state of denuclearization. It is hoped that President Moon Jae-in's trip to here in Washington will set off a domino effect of rapid fire of summit meetings between the relevant parties. The Moon-Trump summit could become the spark for yet another inter-Korean summit meeting, or perhaps even the third meeting between leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump, taking the peninsula a few steps closer to a complete denuclearization deal. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Washington.
Breaking a long silence since the Pyeongyang-Washington summit in Hanoi, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has said he won't give in to sanctions. Our Oh Jung-hee tells us more on the possible motive behind his remarks, which came right before South Korea-U.S. summit.
Building a strong, independent economy on its own, struggling through the sanctions. That's what North Korea plans to do after its summit with the U.S. in February fell through with no agreement. According to Pyongyang state-run media, Kim Jong-un led a full meeting of the North Workers' Party Central Committee on Wednesday. He shared his analysis of the current international situation and the summit he had with U.S. President Trump. Then he stressed the need to strengthen the foundations for an independent economy through the spirit of, quote, self-reliance, a term that he repeated 27 times. Kim made no mention of the U.S. nor nuclear weapons, but emphasized the North will not give in to international sanctions.
Kim Jong-un underscored the need to build a self-supporting national economy based on our efforts, technology, and resources under the spirit of self-reliance to deal a telling blow to the hostile forces who misjudge that sanctions can bring North Korea to its knees.
Kim Jong-un is sending a message here that he will keep his focus on economic development and won't really veer back to developing nuclear weapons. But at the same time, his remarks show that the North won't give in to international sanctions or accept the U.S. all-or-nothing deal, and that it'll stand on its own in developing its economy.
What Kim Jong-un wants is to have sanctions lifted partially by dismantling the regime's Yongbyon nuclear complex. The message shows Kim's very strong will on that front. The North's intention is to endure until its goal is accomplished.
Pyongyang isn't closing the door on nuclear negotiations, and Seoul's Unification Ministry says that the North is reaffirming its economic development policy. But time is not on North Korea's side, as sanctions are taking their toll. Pundits say North Korea can't endure the sanctions forever and is rather waiting for a proper middle ground to be found through South Korea's contacts with the U.S. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
And these decisions are expected to be ratified at the Supreme People's Assembly on Thursday, as North Korea's newly formed parliament is set to hold its first session. In other news, in a landmark ruling, the Constitutional Court of Korea has ruled that criminalizing abortion is unconstitutional. The court asked the National Assembly to revise the criminal code by the end of next year. Our Choi Si-young reports.
Overturning an earlier decision from 2012, the Constitutional Court says the ban on abortion is unconstitutional. But it didn't immediately nullify the statute, which punishes both the women and doctors involved in intentional miscarriages. According to South Korea's criminal code, a woman who procures an abortion can face prison time or a fine. There is no fine for the doctor who performs the abortion, but the prison term can be longer. 7 out of the court's 9 judges said the ban on abortion violates a woman's right to choose how to live her life because the law makes almost no exceptions at any point in a pregnancy. The court said that women should be able to choose to terminate a pregnancy when in the early stages. Some experts say the question of just how early that period should be is the reason the court didn't nullify the law right away, but instead gave Parliament time to revise it.
Deciding when and how to allow abortion is a job of the legislature, not the Constitutional Court. Parliament should listen carefully to what the public think about those issues and make a decision.
The case decided on Wednesday was brought by an obstetrician convicted of performing an abortion, who appealed to the Constitutional Court in 2017, asking that it review the ban. With the National Assembly set to revise the law by next year, South Korea has a rare chance to update the 66-year-old regulation to better reflect women's rights and changes in our society. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Now let's move on to a momentous period in Korea's history. Today marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of Korea's Provisional Government. Our Cha Sang-mi looks back at how the critical turning point in the country's history all unfolded.
The democratic ideals that are enshrined in South Korea's constitution date back to the establishment of Korea's provisional government. The Republic of Korea shall be a democratic republic. Article 1 of the Korean Provisional Charter later became the start of Korea's current constitution. So how did Korea come this far as a democratic republic? It all goes back to March 1st of 1919, when following months of protests, Koreans declared their country free and independent from Japan's colonial rule. With the March 1st movement as a catalyst, Korean independence fighters in Shanghai established the provisional government in April the same year. Among the 8 or more provisional Korean governments, both at home and abroad, there were 3 main ones: the National Council of Korea, based in the Russian city of Vladivostok, the Hansung government, based in Seoul, and the government in Shanghai. The provisional governments in Korea and Russia were under close scrutiny from Japan, limiting their activity. That prompted the decision in September 1919 to join the 3 main provisional governments together here in Shanghai. under the first elected president, Lee Seung-man, an ardent nationalist who tried to gain international support for Korea's independence. Shanghai was an ideal place for the unified provisional government because it was an international city and was out of Japan's reach at the time. In Shanghai, the provisional government engaged in diplomatic activities, published and distributed newspapers to inform the world of Japan's atrocities and raise funds for the independent movements. After 13 years in Shanghai, the provisional government had to keep moving to different cities within China, passing through Changsha and Guangzhou to evade the constant threat of discovery and Sino-Japanese War. The final destination was Chongqing, where it stayed until 1945. Following the surrender of Japan on August 15, 1945, figures such as Kim Gu returned home. Kim Gu was the last president of the provisional government, and he fought against the country's looming division until he was assassinated in 1949. The cabinet may not have continued, but the legacy of the provisional government still remains as part of South Korea's democracy. 차상미, Arirang News.
And in light of today's centennial of Korea's provisional government, a commemorative event is being held in central Seoul to mark the occasion. For more details, let's connect to our Kim Ji-yeon, who's currently at one of the main events in Yeouido for us. Ji-yeon, the event you're at is taking place at a significant venue and a significant time. Tell us more.
Sure, I'm standing at the Yeouido Park Culture Square, where the festivities are just getting started. Located near me are the rows of beautiful cherry blossoms, and the venue is at a military arm, is a significant place where a landing took place from a military arm of Korea's provisional government, which landed at the year the country gained independence from Japan's 35-year-long colonial rule at exactly 7:19 p.m. local time in 1945. The event, which is taking place at the same location and timing, it is a dedication for the efforts made by the Korea's provisional government for their dedication to fight liberation from Japan.
Now, Ji-yeon, I believe various performances and a reenactment of the independent activists' efforts are scheduled. Can you tell us more about what's planned for tonight?
Sure. The event starts with a performance including a torch of independence, which was ignited last month at a ceremony marking the 100th anniversary of the March 1st movement, and then travel across the country for 42 days. An estimated 10,000 people are expected to participate in this event, including government officials, former independence fighters and their families, as well as the general public. That's around 10 times more than last year. Other commemorative events are also taking place worldwide, including Shanghai and Los Angeles. That's it for me. Back to you guys. I'm reporting live from Seoul's Yeouido Park Square.
We've been seeing huge changes in the temperature between morning and night these days.
That's right, and it's a good idea to have an extra layer handy for your morning and evening commute. For more details, let's connect to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for us. Michelle, what's the latest?
The temperature is expected to be chillier than usual tomorrow due to the cold front coming down from the northwest. Now, Seoul will wake up to 6 degrees Celsius, while Chuncheon plunges down further to 3 degrees. However, the warm westerly wind will boost the highs back into the average readings by Friday afternoon, when they'll range between 16 and also 19 degrees. And Sunday through Monday, rain is in the forecast. But by the middle of next week, Seoul should see the highs back in its 20s. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
We're going to end things a little bit earlier today and connect shortly to Yeouido to give you live coverage of the centennial ceremony.
We'll be back same time tomorrow with the usual edition of Arirang News. Special live coverage of the Provisional Government Centennial Ceremony coming up next.